So making jokes in Australia is now a prohibited activity, guys. Sorry to tell you. Now, of course, I'm talking about the recent scandal involving Lisa Jane Spencer, where she found herself in hot water after making a rather crude sketch about Aboriginal people, which involved her sniffing a big old bottle of petrol. Now, a lot of the debate surrounding this topic is really just around, oh, how funny was the sketch though, right? Like, oh, it wasn't even that funny. Oh, it was pretty crude, lowbrow, etc. You know, I've even seen some people say, oh, you know, if she changed the script here and here, it would have been passable and she wouldn't have gotten into trouble. But I want to say, like, who cares, right? Who cares? Like, who made you the arbiter of what is funny enough to be an offensive joke, right? Like, if there was a spectrum, where on the spectrum do I need to make my jokes for it to be passable, right? When it comes to offensive comedy and these sorts of things. The point being that you don't have the right to determine what is funny and what is not funny, and what is too offensive and what isn't too offensive. That's the whole point of satire. The whole point of satire is to leave a room in the community, in the culture, for just mockery, for just blatant mockery of all groups, right? Not just Aboriginals, every group. Because was it a crude joke? Yeah. Okay. Was it genius? No. It was a throwaway Instagram sketch that lasted like 30 seconds to a minute or something. And honestly, compared to all the brain rot, degenerate slop we've got going around on the internet these days, I don't think it's that bad, and you definitely shouldn't lose your job over it. Because really, this whole debacle has nothing to do with how offensive the sketch was. The reason Lisa had the entire left-wing mob and all the left-wing media outlets attack her is because she dared to question the state religion, that being the Aboriginal anti-intellectual industrial complex, as I like to call it, like the military industrial complex, but for Aboriginals. The problem isn't that the joke wasn't funny, the problem is that she dared to commit heresy against the state religion. That's basically what it is. This isn't the first time that comedians have gotten in trouble for making jokes about Aboriginals. There's a list of them that I found online, including a sitcom TV in America that made a little passing remark, which apparently Kevin Rudd had to come up and, you know, apologize for and like critique them for. So even Americans, with their freedom of speech and all their rights, are still not allowed to joke about Aboriginals. It's just that prohibited. But the question is why? Why can't we joke about this topic? And the answer is because the entire Aboriginal land rights movement, the entire Aboriginal anti-intellectual industrial complex, is built on lies. And those lies fall apart when you start to question them properly. Now, I don't have time to get into all of it, but as far back as you go, whether it be the so-called massacres, or the stolen generation, or Ernie Dingo, or Mabo, or whatever it may be, treaty, it's all built on lies, which was largely influenced by communists. Okay, read this book. I've referenced this book before because it's really important. And what a lot of people fail to recognize in this country is that there are a lot of people who are financially dependent on this industrial complex remaining in place. Meaning that there are like thousands, if not tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of Aboriginal so-called passing people, whatever it may be, who are getting these big paychecks from either government jobs or Aboriginal targeted jobs and industries, right? So these people have an incentive to try and keep this narrative afloat and to try and not just keep it afloat, but make this narrative bigger and bigger and bigger, right? They want this narrative to take over the entire country. Right? They want to put a voice to Parliament in our government. That's how far they want to take this. They're not going to stop at any point because they get money from it. If they commit to this and they climb the ranks and they socially climb the right ways, they get to find themselves in a position of power within the bureaucracy. Thomas Sowell, not Sewell, Sowell, the black guy, he writes about this, talking about like left-wing intellectuals and this sort of like cult-like mindset they get because they get these benefits. And he talks about how like during the civil rights movement, there were plenty of black civil rights activists that were basically just using the black population to give themselves power. And that's exactly what's happening right now. All these leftists who are squawking and squealing online, really just trying to signal to their own group that, hey, look, I deserve to be taken seriously in this movement because I'm willing to fight back. That's what it's all about, really. It's all about power. It has nothing to do with comedy. It's all about power. And you can see it's about power when you start to look at what the ABC and what all these Aboriginal activists are allowed to push and allowed to advocate for. It was only this year that the ABC got this half-caste Aboriginal bloke to go on air and to lecture Australians on Australia Day about how they're immoral for having barbecues because that day commemorates the massacre of their people.
Some people say you shouldn't get too political around January 26. It might ruin the barbecue. The meat, so that it's coated on both sides. Just as some historians believe the gifts distributed by soldiers given to Aboriginal people at Manly Cove were coated in smallpox. But don't focus on that. It might ruin the barbecue. It's really important to keep an eye on the time, so you don't overcook your meat and ruin the barbecue. Time was, of course, something the Aboriginal people didn't have. Within the first couple of years, reports suggest roughly half to 70% of the Indigenous population of the southeast were gone. Imagine if 70% of the guests at your barbecue were gone, forever, within just a few years. But don't let that ruin your barbecue. Bon appetit.
Right, so basically saying you can't even enjoy your holidays now because we're in control of this country, because our narrative is now the leading narrative, and the government, the institutions, and the media are all backing us, so shut the fuck up, basically. The same guy that did that segment has like his own taxpayer-funded talk show now, which I bet would flop if it wasn't for that. And he had this guy on, who the entire segment was this guy pretending to be white in order to mock Australians, right? Like, literally doing basically what Lisa Jane Spencer does, short of a petrol bottle, right?
So, you're here to give the white perspective?
Sure I am.
But you're black.
So, they do panels about us all the time. Talking about them without them is pretty much the whitest thing that I can do.
Fair enough. And you're going to answer my questions like you're a white person.
I don't have any change.
I'm not asking for change.
But that's what white people hear whenever black people talk, a request for a handout. See, Anthony, I can call you Anthony, right?
On top of that, we've also seen anti-white artwork be celebrated by the mainstream institutions, such as this, which portrays, you know, an Aboriginal woman killing and spearing British people. Okay, that's totally acceptable, but you can't sniff a petrol bottle, I guess. We've seen our statues get torn down one by one while MPs stay silent, while the media stays silent. They'll even interview them and not dox them or anything, right? So there's no doxing going on there for these people who are tearing down these 100-year-old statues, right? It's about power, guys. It's about power. And the left-wing media and all the activists have the power because the state is preventing white Australians from standing up and speaking out due to various reasons. We don't have free speech in this country. I don't know if you know that, okay? We have the implied right to political communication, basically, which really means nothing at this point. It means nothing when you start to actually, you know, challenge the walls of your cage or your prison. So you think about, like, you know, a show like South Park could not exist in Australia. I love South Park, right? It could not exist in Australia for multiple reasons. I think the closest thing we've probably gotten to South Park in Australia is maybe the Chris Lilly show. And as far as I know, didn't he get cancelled as well? He got completely shut down. End of an era, right? End of comedy, in my opinion, in Australia. That was when it really started to go downhill. And when we realized, oh, we can't even be a bit edgy now, which is, if you're an Australian, our humor's pretty edgy, right? It's pretty rough. But no, we can't even have that anymore. They're taking that away from us. But the reasons a show like South Park couldn't exist, because one, the hate speech and anti-vilification laws that were brought in around 1975. And then we have, of course, the defamation laws, which means that we can't mock any sort of person publicly in a crude way. And then thirdly, of course, you've got the woke mob, right? And the woke mob gets their power because the government is complicit in all their behaviors, meaning that the government doesn't stop them from doing all the destructive things they're doing, and therefore they're basically promoting it. Because every institution's been taken over by Marxism. That's pretty much it. Again, go read Red Over Black. Go look into, you know, Rumble. Look at Willie Wagtail's videos on how free speech died in Australia. Then you'll start to understand what's happened to this country in a very short amount of time. And they're getting away with it, and they're winning because conservatives or right-wingers aren't pushing back enough. We're not engaged enough because we're not that sensitive, we're not that thin-skinned, and we're not trying to climb this ideological ladder within the institutions that gives us positions of power. We're just trying to live normal lives, right? But that's that apathy, you know, that lack of engagement is what gives these people power. So get engaged, get active. Lisa has a GoFundMe that she's put up here to help her fight some legal battles to try and challenge this as unfair dismissal. So best of luck to her, and yeah, see you next time.